Welcome to the Underground, the Steel City Underground, the black and gold standard for Pittsburgh Steelers coverage. Now, here are your hosts, Joe Kuzma and Brian E. Roach.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Steel City Underground podcast. My name is Joe Kuzma, and as almost always, joined by my cohort, my colleague. I don't like calling him my sidekick because, of course, it's 1A to 1B, the other host of the Steel City Underground podcast, one Mr. Brian E. Roach. Brian, what's going on, my friend?
It's a beautiful day, a lovely day. I'm enjoying life. The world is my oyster.
The world is your oyster. I like seafood. How do you feel about the seafood? We can't talk about that other word. The 5-letter, 6-letter thing that's burnt bread. We can't talk about that anymore. But seafood.
No, we can't talk about that.
But seafood.
It depends. I like the scallops. I like me some bacon wrapped scallops. That's some good stuff. I like a variety of different fishes, as long as it's not too fishy. And I don't like the shellfish that much, though. Not a big lobster guy because I think it's too expensive and it's just stupid. And I don't really like the crabs.
Oh man, both of those in either case, if you get a good lobster, it's very good if you get if it's cooked properly. Of course, it's it can be very expensive too. I got a good story about this, actually. When I first started dating my wife, we went down to Myrtle Beach in 2003, 2004, 2003, I believe it was, spring break from college, and they had it was a place, I believe it was actually the same place. It's the Steelers bar down there. I believe it was called Oscars. Don't quote me on it, but I remember going somewhere that was a huge Steelers bar. May not have been the same place, or may have been another seafood place there, but it had a claw machine with actual live lobsters in it. Now, one thing I've done pretty much my entire life, and I get this from my uncle, he used to play like the little prize claw machines, and he would get like the stuffed animals out of them, and then like what would you do with them? He really wouldn't give me like trillions. I mean, he was good at it. He had like garbage bags full of them, and he would keep them, in the basement or garage or whatever, and then Christmas time he would distribute it and donate it to hospitals or whoever was doing like a toy drive. And so for a long period of time there too, as well, when I was younger and more irresponsible with my money, I would actually it would only cost like $1 or $2 to get some really quality stuff, and I've gotten like Kermit the Frog and Pikachu, and I've won a lot of cool stuff for my young daughter. But there's even times there where we're like, hey, we're going to keep these, and we end up donating them. So there's a fun fact for me. But down in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, they had a prize claw with lobsters. It was like a lobster tank. And
nice.
As soon as we saw it, my buddies that are with us that made the trip, and they looked at me and they knew immediately. I'll never forget the look on my buddy Ben's face. His eyes like twinkled, almost like a SpongeBob meme, and he just knew I was going to not only play this but win it. And on the very first pool, my wife is very big into, don't harm any animals, everything like that. Not that I'm not. Like, I don't kick puppies and stuff like that. I don't want to make it sound like that. But she's the kind that will watch a movie, and as soon as they show a dog on screen, she starts bawling because she thinks the inevitable fate of that creature is to die. So she can't watch movies where, the dog dies at the end. I won't give away any spoilers, but there's plenty of movies like that. But anyways, I grabbed the lobster on the first try, I think. It may have been the second, but whichever it was my last. The thing wriggled free right before falling into the hole where I won it. And if I would have won it, I would have gotten it cooked and eaten for free. So it would have cost me a whole $1. Or maybe $2 if I had 2 tries at it. As memory serves me, she was almost ready to start banging on the glass because she just couldn't see the living creature. His fate was determined by a prize claw, Brian. But alas, I like the seafood. I don't get into the oysters. So when you say the world's my oyster, I would much rather something else. But I can do lobster, the crab, if it's like once or twice a year at the most, because crab's just a real pain in the butt to try and crack open and eat and stuff like that. But hey, some fun facts about us, folks. As you can tell, we have absolutely nothing about football to talk about, so we will continue with our culinary. No, we won't. But anyways, we have a fun topic today. We have some ideas, but we're kind of tabling a few waiting some extra news. We did get some news from the Steelers today that we have some guys who signed our restricted tenders. So we'll have Matt Filer and Mike Hilton will be back. Mike Hilton's still looking for a long-term deal. And we're just waiting for a little more news like that to kind of trickle around and see what happens before we start shooting into that. We talked about all of our wishes and desires for training camp and some of the preseason on the previous episode, so go back and listen to that. But this is more a historical take. These may be some hot and cold takes. This is something we're going to have a little fun with. So seemingly, we can't stop talking about quarterbacks with the Pittsburgh Steelers. And people keep bringing up names. They bring up everything from Cam Newton to, dare I even mention, Colin Kaepernick's name pops up even on some of these blogger sites and stuff like that. The guy's like 33, 34 years old. So I don't know. It's just we keep talking about no matter who it is, for whatever various reasons, they seem like they're poised to roll into 2020 with the guys they have on their depth chart right now. And you know what? They got quite a few guys who have NFL experience now that's not usually too common when you're talking about, you know, even going over to the fourth string or presumably fourth string quarterbacks, which, that battle would be presumably between Duck Hodges and Paxton Lynch at this point, both of whom have taken regular season snaps. But we thought about going back into the time capsule, the time machine today, and just looking back at some names that were Pittsburgh Steelers quarterbacks, and let's see who was the best of the best. And I mean, it's a very short list, but I think it's kind of cool to go back, bring up some of these names, particularly some of these names which will irritate Brian if they happen to be mentioned.
Absolutely correct. I slipped my absolutely in early this time. The A word. I have to stop saying the A word, but. There are definitely names on that list that I don't want to say there. What's interesting is as I was meandering through it, there are guys who perform better than I remember them performing. Now, in large part, that was because of the defenses they had on their side at the time. But nonetheless, they had better records than I actually remembered them having. And then there's that guy. I'm not mentioning that guy.
Oh, I'll mention that guy. I just love to see your skin crawl. You should mention him first. He's responsible for.
I can't speak the name. I cannot speak the name.
He is responsible for bringing the Steelers to a Super Bowl. Bill Cowher's first Super Bowl.
No, he's not. He's not responsible for it at all. He has absolutely nothing to do with it. Greg Lloyd and Kevin Green, Rod Woodson, those are the guys that are responsible. He's not responsible.
Well, Rod Woodson got hurt in the first game that year. And,
I know. So
he came back,
he's not really. Rod's really not. But Lloyd,
he probably still is.
Kevin Green and some of the other guys that were on the team, those guys are responsible. That guy, not responsible.
Bam Morris,
irresponsible. Damn it.
Bam Morris, maybe.
Yeah, the Bamster.
But we're talking quarterbacks. We're talking guys who threw the ball. Did Bam ever throw the ball? I know Bettis threw a few that looked a little ugly. I'm going to find out if Bam Morris has any pass attempts. You just never know, man. I mean, Cowher wasn't without doing gimmicks and taking chances and risks too. Can you imagine the onside kick in the Super Bowl if that didn't go his way? I mean, wow. Yeah, the criticism. You know what I mean? Everybody, I'm sure if there was social media back in his heyday, a lot of people would have been like, "Hey, fire this guy. He can't get out of the conference championship games." You know what I mean? And you see how it works with some franchises. I mean, what was it? Marty Schottenheimer had a good thing going, I thought, with the then San Diego Chargers, and he had a load of talent, LaDainian Tomlinson and guys like that. Phillip Rivers still back then. Darren Sproles is still playing, but that was the thing. He couldn't get over the hill, and I think that was the same reason why Cleveland let him go ages ago. Before that, too, it was just that was the thing on Andy Reid's back the whole time too for many years. So still great coaches and whatnot. It's just I don't know, for one reason or another. I was just going with that because there's so many different things that we're going to look at. There's really only 3 coaches, so you can't ever really do this thing. I mean, we looked at some earlier coaches when we were trying to figure out what to talk about today, like John Blood McNally and or who was the guy I said was the jerk, Buddy Parker. Buddy Parker, yeah. It's like, who really cares? It starts at Chuck Noll, and that's all we care about. So Chuck Noll, Bill Cowher, Mike Tomlin, 1.0 point or another, everyone probably loathed them for one reason or another, and it was probably because of some of these quarterbacks. So, you get
could very well be.
You get to some modern era here. I think we got 1969 as the first quarterback with starting records here on the list, and you got 0-5 Terry Hanratty, and you go to 1970, and Terry Bradshaw is 3-5, Hanratty's 2-4, Bradshaw's 5-8 in 1971, Hanratty is 1-0, and then it turns around from there. Obviously Terry Bradshaw is a name that I don't know that comes up as often as it should anymore. I think when I was growing up, I think a lot of people are like, hey, this guy won like 4 Super Bowls, and this Steelers dynasty and this and that. And within a certain period of time, the San Francisco 49ers had caught up a little bit with that. And then, you had the Dallas Cowboys teams and, of course, the Patriots. And you have all these guys like Peyton Manning and, that wasn't even thought of back then maybe. And they put up obscene, the Drew Breeses and all that. They put up obscene like gobs of passing yards. This isn't the same thing that actually went on, in Terry's heyday. It was defense and, control the clock, run the football, and, everything like that. But he had 2 great receivers, and a lot of people were always trying, even downplay some of his stats, saying, hey, look at the guys that are in the Hall of Fame that he was throwing to. You know what I mean? Lynn Swann, John Stallworth. But you look at it. He threw for how many? He never had a 4,000-yard season. That was not a thing back then. 3,000 yards was even like something that you didn't see a lot from Terry Bradshaw. And God forbid, I'm sure some people, they wanted to pull their hair out. They go. And, you look at 1978 and 79, the guy threw 45 interceptions over that span of time, the 45 interceptions, the 54 touchdowns. 1980 also 24-22. He was not without risk. The one year in 77, 14 games, 17 touchdowns to 19 interceptions. So, it was, you could see this all through his career. He has 212 career touchdown passes to 210 interceptions, yet he has 4 rings. So he had some leadership. He made some big clutch plays. If you had the ability to, there's been a lot of classic games played during this whole coronavirus pandemic, and that's been great for me, Brian, because I know you've been around since television's changed from black and white to color, but I never got to watch some of these things. I know, I'm sorry, buddy. It had to come out. I know. You have more of a historical, what do you want to say, reference to having grown up and seen some of this stuff, whereas I was born in 81, so the Steelers had already won their Super Bowls and became their dynasty before I was even born. So I got to relive this a lot sometimes through replays or condensed. They do like the half-hour Super Bowl things sometimes, NFL Network leading up to Super Bowl, and that's the best that I got to see is some of these Super Bowl games. And then when I get to see some of this stuff, I was just watching, which one was it? Because, they played the Cowboys. I was just looking at it. I was like, man, Franco Harris is a beast. And I was watching Terry Bradshaw. They throw across the field on 3rd down, and they're talking about guys headhunting the receivers and things like that. That's really cool. But you see how clutch these guys are. And it's tough for me because, a lot of people will look back on it and all you know is, hey, this guy won this many trophies and he had these kind of numbers, but yet there's some other significance there to their play that makes them great. Aside from the fact that Terry Bradshaw, second best Steelers franchise all time as a starting quarterback, has a record of 107 wins and 51 losses, second all time to the next guy we'll probably be talking about. So, but obviously Terry's one of the greats, and I still call him the real TB12. Not that imposter that's now in Tampa. He's the real TB12, and that's Terry Bradshaw. For better or worse, no matter how he's alienated some Steelers fans and stuff over the years or had spats with Chuck Noll and all that other stuff, he still should be considered one of the greats. And obviously, if we're doing a podcast that's about the greatest Steelers quarterbacks, he's got to be included.
Well, yeah, there's no question about that. And Bradshaw has when you think about his career and the other guy that's going to be in the top 2 conversation, there's a lot of similarities in certain ways where, they both depended on strong defenses in the early parts of their career to win games. Bradshaw had to do that. Bradshaw has a unique career path because when guys like Mel Blount basically forced the NFL to change the rules, Bradshaw was there to take advantage of it. And that's where you see that his potential with Swan and Stallworth and the receivers really starts to grow because of that change. Once the receivers were kind of set free when the Mel Blount rule was put in place, Bradshaw was there to take advantage of it. And the fact that the Steelers were prepared for that and the Steelers had the receivers in place to do it helped him a lot. You look at Bradshaw's overall career, right? And, 1970, he's got a losing record. 1971, he's got a losing record. And then you start in 72, 73, and on. And Bradshaw, as a starting quarterback, I think doesn't have another losing record for the rest of his career.
No, you're correct.
And while he didn't finish every one of those seasons, and I think he was 4-4 one year, so he had a year where he was, I think, 76, where he got hurt early on. One of the best defenses we ever had when you think about it. Mike Kruzak goes 10 or 6-0, 6-0, but it's because of the defense. So Bradshaw has that kind of legendary status, right? As a clutch guy, as a winner, and I think it's well deserved. We've written articles in the past. We've talked about this in the past. Who's the greatest quarterback in Steelers history? And it is hard to eventually argue against the number of championships. He's got 4. Ben's got 2. Does championship trump everything else? I don't know the answer to that, to be honest. And it's hard because you want to discount some of Ben's championships like the first one and say, okay, well, the defense won that for him. Okay, I might say I think Fast Willie Parker and Antoine Randall L won that one for him, but
yeah,
then you go to the second one, and I've said this 100 times, and I'll say it again. Ben Roethlisberger was the MVP of that Super Bowl. I don't care about Santonio Holmes in that sense. I loved what he did, but I think the throw is more impressive than the catch.
Hey,
I've said it 100 times.
That's more than fair. I was going to bookend and leave Ben for last, obviously, because we're going to
yes.
I got to jump down this. By the way, we're working with the 2019 media guides for both the Steelers and the NFL with some other statistical sites and things like that are mixed in here as far as our source material. So I don't think that should matter too much because Ben only really played a game and a half last year, so it's not going to skew the numbers too much.
No.
You would just have to toss Duck or Mason Rudolph into this stuff too. And once you get past Bradshaw, and we're talking, well, what was Terry's last year? Let's see, 83, right?
83,
yeah, 83.
I think. Yeah.
So you had some guys like Cliff Stout and Mark Malone, David Woodley. And just looking at the bottom, I was looking at the bottom of the record list and working my way up just to get to some interesting names in here. Joe Gilliam's in here too somewhere. We mentioned Terry Hanratty. So you go from the bottom. Scott Campbell, 1984 through 86, went 0-2. Jim Miller, who I liked Jim Miller. I love Jim Miller. I love listening to him on the radio. But he had a cup of coffee in Pittsburgh. In 95 and 96, he went 0-1. Byron Leftwich had 2 stints with the team, 2008, and then came back between 2010 to 2012. Went 0-1 as an actual starter. Todd Blackledge, 2-3, 88 to 89. Kent Graham, that was a painful one, Brian. We'll be getting into the 90s soon enough, but Kent Graham in 2000 went 2-3. He was supposed to be the guy, and he signed a pretty rich contract as well way back when, which doesn't seem like much now, but I think it was like 3 years for $15 million or whatever. And now it's like guys are getting like that kind of contract to be just sit on the bench. So let's see. It can't be a Steelers quarterback conversation without the GOAT, Landry Jones. It was just my excuse to do this podcast today, just to bring him up. To be completely honest, he went 3 and
it can be. There can be a conversation without Landry Jones, but
he went 3-2. Steve Bono, 87 and 88 went 2-1. There's a guy.
Steve Sonny Bono.
Yeah, you know what? It's such an interesting guy to bring up because he was with the Vikings for 2 years. The Vikings, I believe, drafted him in 1985 in the 6th round. He was with the Steelers for 2 years in 87 and 88. Then he went and he was like kind of the backup and or I want to say third stringer with that quarterback factory. I don't even like calling the quarterback factory with the San Francisco 49ers because, I mean, okay, you had Montana. Steve Young was already, like, good, if not great, but was sitting behind Montana, and he had went and opted to play in the USFL to begin with. So, you know, it's kind of one of those things where it's like, yeah, you had two great quarterbacks, potentially three, because then Bono goes over to the Kansas City Chiefs, which I remember he was there for 2-3 years, finishes out his career with the Packers, Rams, and Panthers, plays from 85 through 99. He got a ring somewhere in the middle there. Super Bowl 24 with the 49ers when they let's see, was that against the Broncos? I think so. But anyways, you know, it was one of those things where, yeah, he signed a pretty decent deal. Like everybody, the Chiefs for the longest time, until they went and got Patrick Mahomes, they were always like, let's take somebody else's quarterback and see if we could shine this thing up real nice. Bono being one. I believe Elvis Gerback was another guy that they grabbed from wherever, and obviously Alex Smith. It was always like, they had Montana too. So you want to talk about that pipeline from San Francisco? That's just crazy. But there's a name most Steelers fans would probably be familiar with, but probably with Bono, probably wouldn't be familiar with him for his tenure with the Steelers because he really only appeared in like 5 games. I mean, he attempted a total of, 109 passes. And let's see, completed only 40.4% of them, 548 yards, 6 touchdowns to 4 interceptions. But hey, 2-1, man. It's you know, you can hang your hat on that, I guess. Dennis Dixon also went 2-1 in 2008 through 2011, and Michael Vick was also 2-1 as well. And just we'll bump up to the bottom of this list before we get to some of these more interesting ones. So Joe Gillen, we mentioned 4-2-1. Terry Hanratty was 6-11. Charlie Batch was 6-3 with about a 10-year period with the Steelers off and on. Mike Krutschek 6-0. David Woodley 7-6. Cliff Stout went 9-7. And then we start getting into the 90s where things get a little more interesting because you got Bubby Brister here. Bubby Brister did not have the Bubs. Man, I used to get made fun of so much when I was a kid. You had to deal with Cleveland Browns fans where I grew up too, and everybody made fun of Bubby. We tried to make fun of Bernie as well, Bernie Kosar, that is, and it was just always a back and forth. But Bubby wasn't a guy like, you didn't even want to play Tecmo Bowl if you had Bubby Brister as your quarterback. And then somehow he went to the Jets. It's like, we talked about the Jets always getting fleeced with free agent contracts and always getting the bad end of it with everything, man. It's like, there's another one with Bubby Brister, and he who shall not be named, who will be named soon. Another guy that went to the Jets. But Brian, your thoughts on the good old Bubs? We could even pull some stats for the Bubby Brister here, but I just remember I was still a baby boy, and Bubby Brister wasn't anyone that I think somebody was going to buy me his jersey in the youth medium or whatever I was wearing at the time.
Bubby Brister has his legend basically from, I think, the 1990, where, you know, he managed to steer the team to 9-7, I think, in that season. And, you know, when you think about that people had a little faith. And I think even the year before he had a winning record, probably 8-6, somewhere in that range. But Bubby was not good. You know, he was okay, and he would do some things, and he'd get you excited. But you could also count on Bubby Brister to make a throw that on no earthly reason should be made at any given time for no apparent reason. You could count on Bubby to do something dumb as a rock at some point, and you know, everybody knew it, and you understood. Look, we're in the doldrums of quarterback play here. This is who we've got. We make the best of it, and we try and move forward. And you know, he was a nice enough guy, right? He was charismatic. People liked the Southern drawl or whatever it was that he had. Texas, New Orleans. I don't remember where it was from, but it was an accent, and people liked that down home feel that Bubby had. But he really wasn't that good.
Louisiana. Just like Terry.
Louisiana. Yeah, there you go.
Just like Terry. So, very similarity there. Third round pick of the 86 draft. And when we talk about sometimes with the picks, let me see. He threw for 10,000 yards, 51 touchdowns to 57 interceptions, only completed 52.5% of his passes. And then he had a very short tenure, the 1 year with the New York Jets. And, you know what? I wonder if Bubby actually has a Super Bowl ring here, because he had a few years where he was backing up John Elway. I forgot about that. It's kind of like Bernie Kosar got one for backing up Troy Aikman with the Dallas Cowboys. Let me see here. I think he was. He's a two-time Super Bowl champion. So you know what? He can just he could rain on our parade, pee all over us, and just say, "Hey, look, I got the rings." You know what I mean? That's all that counts. Didn't get him with Pittsburgh, yeah, but we skipped over Mark Malone. I think Mark Malone's claim to fame. I mean, he got him to the AFC title game in '84. This is the tail end of a lot of guys' legendary careers there. Like John Stallworth had a heck of a year back then too. And Mark Malone's a guy I think that's going to be best known for. We didn't pick Dan Marino, and that's the thing that they stuck with Malone, who they had from 1980, and they passed on Marino, and Malone lasted with the Steelers until '87, ended up with the San Diego Chargers in 1988, and then the New York Jets in 1989. That's where he finished his career. So
Jets sure do love to take ex-Steelers quarterbacks.
Yeah, 54 touchdowns to 68 interceptions, 8,582 yards, and 50.2 lifetime or Steelers career completion percentage. I don't know, Brian. Anything else to say about Mark Malone other than he wasn't Dan Marino?
Mark Malone has I don't know that I think Mark Malone has been completely treated fairly in the annals of Steelers history. I've read articles that have ranked Mark Malone as the worst quarterback in the history of the Pittsburgh Steelers, and that's not fair.
No, not at all.
I don't think that is in fact the case. Was he good? No. But was he the worst? No. And I think he, as you mentioned, the real flaw of Mark Malone is he's not Dan Marino, and he should have been Dan Marino. Not because Mark Malone should have really been Dan Marino, but because there shouldn't have been this allure of Mark Malone. Mark Malone was kind of a pretty boy, kind of a quarterback. He's that strikingly handsome guy from wherever, and guys. I don't know. He convinced the Steelers, I'm the guy, and he really wasn't the guy, and. You just don't know what would have changed. So I think he gets a helping heap load of blame for them not taking Dan Marino. And I'm sure he wasn't in the back rooms of Steelers offices going, "No, I'm the guy. You don't need that Marino character." I'm sure he probably would have, but nobody should have been listening.
Yeah, well, we were talking modern era too, and a guy that isn't showing up on this list is Bobby Lane, of course, probably the only guy prior to 1970 worth talking about maybe when it comes to Steelers quarterbacks. I understand they had Johnny Unitas, doesn't count. He didn't he didn't do anything as a Steeler, does not count. Okay, and someone else too that may have won a Super Bowl with the Chiefs. I can't remember the man's name now, but. Bobby Lane, 5 years with the Steelers, was 27-19-2, and you want to talk about in 5 years, Brian, he threw for 9,030 yards, 66 touchdowns to 81 interceptions. He still got named to a Pro Bowl his first year with the Steelers, but he was on the back end of his career, and that was like one of the knocks against this team going from the late 50s to early 60s was they would trade things away and just try and pick up guys that were like this on the back end of their career for better or worse, and it didn't help them. It was always like they got the veteran when it was already too late, when they've already, the gas has run out of their tank. So I thought I would at least have to mention Bobby Lane. We did kind of slide in our disclaimer that was more modern era, but I think he was worth bringing up at least in this conversation.
Absolutely. He even though he was here for a small sample size, even though he was here for as you said, the tail end of his career, Bobby Lane was still probably one of the better, and certainly in the early eras of the Steelers, maybe one of the best, if not the best, Steelers quarterback that they had at that particular time, despite being at the tail end of his career.
Yeah.
He still could do things that the guys that they had otherwise just couldn't do. So yeah, he's absolutely worth bringing up. I agree with that completely, and I have no argument with you.
Yeah, and he was responsible for the Steelers who took this guy in the first round of the 1957 draft, 5th overall, Len Dawson. That's who I was thinking of. Yep. And so when they brought Bobby Lane around, and I know Bobby Lane's a Hall of Famer. Len Dawson ends up being a Hall of Famer too, but not for anything that he did for the Steelers once again.
Nope.
Just a couple years in Pittsburgh. Then he went to the Chiefs. He became a Super Bowl champion, a Super Bowl MVP, NFL Man of the Year. He was a 3-time AFL champion and, multiple-time AFL All-Star and an AFL MVP as well. And he led that league in passing touchdowns and passer rating, and he was named, the all-time team, Chiefs Hall of Fame, and his number is retired. Ouch. And so that's what we're talking about, like how they used to miss on things like this sometimes. It's just, you never know. So I guess some of it's opportunity and things like that too. So he also, got reunited with one of his former coaches, Hank Stram, when he went to the AFL and had a wonderful career there. But alas, we're talking about Steelers quarterbacks. He doesn't really count when you're looking into that. Now we want to get to the guy who you really don't want to count.
Nope, don't want to count him. Not going to count him.
Oh, you don't like Mike Tomczak, man? Mike Tomczak was my dude, man. 1993 to 99, 15 and 12. Tomczak was another kind of AFC North traveled guy, just like Bruce Gradkowski ended up being. I remember Tomczak making fun of him being with the Browns and then making fun of the Browns and the Browns fans when Mike Tomczak would one-up them in a Steelers uniform. That's always fun, and we get some of that enjoyment present day. If you get your jollies from seeing Joe Hayden play well, it worked much in the same way back then, except for, this is Mike Tomczak's time was really, when with the Steelers anyways, is Bill Cowher era.
Yeah.
So, and he had one year where he really got, he had 15 starts, but for the most part, he was a backup, kind of a reserve guy. Ends up playing 7 years with the Steelers, 6,649 yards, 37 touchdowns, the 43 interceptions. It's pretty much, if we don't mention, even Bradshaw, had a lot of picks. Ben has a lot of picks. I don't think we have many Steelers guys who don't throw interceptions, so don't get too upset when you see anybody out there it's throwing some picks. But Mike Tomczak, it's like I'm afraid to say it, Brian. I want to kind of see the look on your face when I mention Neil O'Donnell.
Don't know who you're talking about. That's he who shall not be named. No, there's no naming. I didn't hear you. It curses the seasons moving forward. You cannot speak that name.
It's kind of to the effect of being an Ohio State fan and calling it that university up north and not referring to it by actual name. It rhymes with Michigan.
Yeah.
So what do we call the Irishman here? I don't know. Like, what's suitable to? We need like a nickname for him besides he who shall not be named, because that's quite wordy. Can we just call him Neil? Does that downplay it at all?
How about Mr. 3 Picks?
3 picks. 3 picks. I was going to go by his jersey number, 14, which, has anybody been wearing that since? That thing's kind of, as far as a quarterback, I should say, I think it's cursed.
Yeah, it is cursed. I wouldn't, nobody should wear that number.
I think I'm going to find out what those. I know they have all the uniform numbers somewhere in this guide. I'm going to see if anyone else has worn 14 since Neil O'Donnell. It's kind of like being on the Madden cover. So, but anyways, Neil O'Donnell, broke a lot of hearts. Now, he made it to a Pro Bowl. Broke a lot of hearts, though. That was his, kind of contract year. And 17 touchdowns, the 7 interceptions, man. That's not too shabby. Almost 3,000 yards. It's almost unheard of for a Steelers quarterback about this time. But like you said, it was mostly the defense. And then he went and tucked tail, went to the Jets, went to the Bengals of all places. And then he had a little bit of a career resurgence. He got a little bit of playing time when he went over to Tennessee. The back half of his career, he had 5 years there, mostly as a backup. He came in for somebody or was a spot starter or something like that. And actually played like maybe 5 or 6 games or something of that nature. But anyways, he was the guy who made Larry Brown an awful lot of money and made the Steelers look very inept in that Super Bowl. And if it wasn't for those picks, who knows how much more hardware you got in the trophy case there. And the other thing is, too, they lose the AFC title game the year just before that as well. So it was a do or die kind of thing with Neil O'Donnell.
Yeah, look, I'm still not gonna say his name because it burns my tongue and it makes me unhappy to do so, and then I feel like dirty and I have to clean my hands. But if I'm going to be as unbiased as I can, during the time he played, he was better than the guys that had initially come before him. But people remember the Super Bowl that he threw away to Larry Brown. What they forget is the damn AFC Championship the year before that he also threw away.
Hallelujah.
No, I can't do it. I can't give him credit. He's evil. He's he who shall not be named. I can go on a rant forever about him. If I meet him, I still want to punch him in the face.
Hey, okay, I got the guys who wore number 14 since he who shall not be named wore it from 90 to 95 and 96. A guy named Shane Edge. I don't know. I don't know anything about Shane Edge. Tom Rowan, also a 1-year guy, and then you go to. This deserves can I do like a little bit of drum roll in the background or whatever? Limas Swede.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, Derek Moy, Derek Moy was undrafted. I think he caught like 1 touchdown. It was probably the only pass that was thrown in his direction, too, because he was a big, tall guy. I remember when they brought him in, it's like everybody in the world should know the ball's going there, or that's where Ben's going with it. And then another drum roll. Sammy Coates.
Sammy Coates.
That's right. I knew there was somebody more recent, and nobody has worn it since, and it should be that's one, if you want to go out and do videos of burning jerseys, go right ahead. There's one that should be bury the ashes while you're at it. So, man, we were brutal. If he ever wanted to come on the show and defend himself, I would let him do it.
No.
You don't have to be on it.
No.
You don't have to be on it.
There can be no defense.
There could be no defense. I know. It sucks. The guy should be able to go to card shows and sign autographs, and I think he may devalue cards if he does that. So it's funny you bring that up. I've been an autograph collector, as we've talked about before, for many, many years. I have never seen a Neil. I can't. I almost said it. Can't do it. I have never seen a he who shall not be named helmet or jersey that somebody actually wanted him to sign in 20 years. I have never seen one, right? And I can understand why not. Look, I'll tell you, I would be tempted to do this for no better reason than just to be annoying. But if he ever did an autograph signing, I would take a Steelers helmet there, a mini one, because I'm not going to invest a lot of money in this silliness, and I'd make him sign it, he who shall not be named. Oh, the custom inscription. And he would be laughing because he gets to pocket your 25 or $50 or whatever you get for the customization.
I can't believe he could get that much.
Never know, man. This will get back. I wonder if this ever gets back around to some of these guys. It's not like we're small timing it anymore, even though we're the least prepared broadcast team of all time. We reach quite a few people, and for all that, like we said, I think the last show, now we're up over 3,500 YouTube subscribers. So thank you, listeners, for that. And now we shall continue with the next portion of our show. This one was entitled "Hate Mail," brought to you by. We should let our buddies know at TSE. I'm gonna reach out and say, hey, you think you get Neil ND14? ND14. It sounds just as dumb as
NO.
That's true.
Nolans 14.
No 14. It works out perfect, actually. And it sounds just as silly as TB12. So, anyways, anyways, one of my favorite guys who happened to actually play in that same Super Bowl, the aforementioned one, he gets a little bit of hate mail too. But I think this is really one of my favorite players growing up. I know Rod Woodson for me is the GOAT. That's the guy I really love. Like some people gravitate to Kevin Green and Greg Lloyd. I was always a Rod Woodson guy. Thrilled to death to meet him and everything like that. When you were there with me about a year and a half ago, that was really great and a really nice guy still too, and just really giving with his time and everything he does. He still works with everything like youth football, et cetera, et cetera. Totally class act. Definitely a Hall of Famer by every stretch of the word. That is to a T who Rod Woodson is. My other guy. And this was the guy, I'm starting to grow up and I'm about to enter high school. This is the first guy where it was like, hey, I could actually buy it, I could get a jersey and it not maybe go out of style right away. And he was, probably on cereal boxes somewhere too and on video games and posters and everything. Cordell Stewart / and I know his popularity was as a gadget player, his rookie year, his first 2 years, and then it was let's get this guy to start throwing the ball. Let's get him to start playing quarterback, because after NO 14 ended up heading out of town, and after the 95 season, that was where the aforementioned year where it was Mike Tomczak and Jim Miller, and you had Tomczak go 10-5 and Jim Miller go 0-1. You get Cordell in there, and his first year isn't like necessarily anything terrible. He's 11-5 as a starter. He gets by, but then it starts to slip 7-9, 5-6. They end up playing Tomczak a little bit, who goes 1-4. Just it wasn't even necessarily, I think, Cordell. I think the teams just weren't as strong at that point. They start to kind of turn it around, and of course Cordell, had to compete with Kent Graham once again. Kent Graham came in and went 2-3 in 2000. He turned that around with the 7-4 record, and then his best season 2001, 13-3, and then of course. He has a game that's very much like that NO 14 guy, Brian, and they lose to what becomes a New England Patriots dynasty going forward, and it's you shed it, you shed it. I know the throw up and everything. It's very disheartening. Another AFC title game down the tubes after a very good 13-3 season, and Cordell. It sucks. Sacked 3 times, 3 picks through 42 attempts. He had a 45.2 rating. It wasn't good. It did not work out, and it's unfortunate because of the guys he had with him at that time too, like Jerome Bettis, Plaxico Burress, Hines Ward. You had like the foundation there: Jason Gilden, Aaron Smith, Joey Porter, Casey Hampton, Chemo Van Olhoffen, these guys, Deshae Townsend, Clark Hagan, some real like classic throwback Steelers names there. Lee Flowers. Like this was a great team, and then it's one game that just doesn't swing in your direction, and this is also a game too where this was the Tom Brady deal. Drew Bledsoe played, Tom Brady comes in, and all this other stuff, man. It's just it's very disheartening. It tarnishes, I think, Cordell, just like you were saying with Mark Malone. I think Cordell. There's some people out there that have the hate mail and don't give him his real comeuppance, and I loved him as a player, and it's just unfortunate how it turned out. And then eventually, he went to the side for Tommy Maddox, who came over from the original XFL as the MVP, and had an opportunity to do something there too. But Cordell ends up going to the Chicago Bears, and that didn't really flourish and turn into anything great for his career, but at least he could say he had played in a Super Bowl, he played an AFC title game, and he's a name that if you throw around in Pittsburgh, he's not going to be as hated as he who shall not be named. But some people are still going to bring up that AFC title game, and there's some bad memories with that.
There's a lot of people who will put the blame for that game on Bill Cowher's shoulders, and Cowher had a reputation until he finally pulled one off. Of losing championship games. Yeah. So, it didn't really always matter who the quarterback was. Look, I'll tell you a story about Cordell. When during Cordell's time with the Steelers, my current wife, not that I've had any others, but the wife that I have, and we weren't married yet, but we had decided to get a puppy. and it was a pug. And she said, "What do you want to name it?" And I said, "Cordell."
Nice.
The dog ended up being named Bandit. And the reason was, by the time we got around to it, it was in the middle of that. It was, I think, after that AFC Championship game, and I went, "The hell with that." He's lost his naming rights to my dog. I'm calling it Bandit after Johnny Quest's dog, and forget it. I was so upset. But Cordell will always have a much, as you can tell, I'm freely using his name.
Yes.
Because I think the team that Cordell was on, for the most part, you had some good players, but you didn't have that kind of team that he who shall not be named was playing on. That kind of potential, where really, if you've got just above average quarterback play for those 2 seasons, they probably win 2 Super Bowls. That's the real issue here. Is I don't know, maybe that year, but I don't think anybody really thinks Cordell Stewart was a good enough quarterback overall. He was exciting. He was fun to watch. You wanted him to succeed, but I don't think anybody really felt he was of the caliber to truly be a Super Bowl champion quarterback. Hey, what's the guy from that purple puke team that won the one year just because the defense was so good? I can't remember what his name is.
Trent Dilfer.
Yeah, Trent Dilfer. Look, Cordell was better than Trent Dilfer. So, it's not saying that he couldn't have won one, but I don't think he was going to be the guy to get them there. And so when that game just, is a bad game, and it happens, he had to be on his game all the time in order to get there. He couldn't overcome his shortcomings. So, but he'll never have that. He'll never give me that queasy feeling that the other guy does.
Well, you know what? It's kind of like Brad Johnson with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers.
Oh yeah, true.
So that was again one of those things. And who else got a ring with that team and got to witness that firsthand? Mike Tomlin. So
yes, he did.
So that's always interesting too. But yeah, Cordell was the one I had his jersey when I was a kid, and it was like champion or starter or whatever the brand was at that point. But not too many more guys to speak about here. The list is starting to thin out. I mean, you go from Cordell to what? Tommy Maddox, he was 16-16-1. Oh, I forgot to mention Cordell. His stats, again, more interceptions than touchdowns, 70-72. So again, it happened, and I'm sure if I pull up the next guy here, Tommy Maddox, and unfortunately for Tommy, Ben he got drafted. He wasn't supposed to be but the third string guy, and couldn't hold on to the job. And then he had mentioned his timing and rhythm and everything else was off. Tommy Maddox himself actually had 2 more touchdowns than interceptions with 42-40. So all these guys are like play it close to the vest, it seems like, that you have on here on this list. So I guess we would just jump right to you're basically the guy who holds all the keys and all the records, 144, 96-1, Big Ben Roethlisberger, and I'm going to try and find all the different passing stats that he holds here. Let me see. He's all time with passing yards and passing touchdowns, 363 touchdowns. Let's see what else he's got here. Those are career lifetime individual records.
You a shorter time to mention the ones he doesn't have.
Well, that's true too. I'm trying to pick off the real easy ones here. The single season too. He has the 5,129 yards and the 34 touchdowns in 2018. He's got all that, and then single game obviously 522 yards, and then he's done the 6 touchdown deal twice within that same within the 2014 season. So Ben holds an awful lot of records. He's pretty much smashed everything in the era of the passing quarterbacks, and still don't think he gets his rightful due. Not necessarily from people in Pittsburgh, but from everyone outside of it. So 2 rings, potentially looking to do some more. He's been a Pro Bowl guy. He was a perennial Pro Bowl guy for a while there from 2014 to 2017. And then everybody had to get Todd Haley fired. So, oh, geez, I said it. Oh, my. So, but, you know, he had some of his best success there and wasn't getting sacked as often. And a lot of people, you know, they say, oh, he's injury prone. He can't play, whatever. Aside from last year, you know, when you go and you look and you see that he missed a game in a season, it was usually because he was sitting on the bench getting a rest in the final week of the season and letting the GOAT play. Landry Jones, that is. In case you forgot the name, here's the name, or this is the name, here's the toy. But anyways, Ben, he pretty much holds everything. He should be a first ballot future Hall of Famer here. And I don't think there's anything really else to say when you're mentioning the great quarterbacks. You start with Terry Bradshaw, you end with Ben Roethlisberger, and that's the way we're doing it here. Yeah,
look, I will suggest that Ben doesn't get the credit he deserves, even in Pittsburgh. There is a vocal, and I don't know how much of a minority, right? There's a vocal group who still does not like Ben Roethlisberger, and for whatever the reasons may be, whether it's, you know, his indiscretions as a youth, whether it's his perceived immaturity at times. You know, he has made some decisions that you could certainly call into question outside of the football field. But when you put him on the field, look, he does stuff that there's never been another quarterback in the NFL that does. And if you cannot see that, then you haven't been watching for the last 14 years closely enough. Is he the same guy he was back in the day? Of course not. But, you know, who is when they're approaching 40, you know, and Ben Roethlisberger I've had this debate in my head so many times. Is he the greatest quarterback in Steelers history? I think he probably is. And that's understanding the limitations of Bradshaw.
And by all means, Brian, you know, that's not a knock or a slight on Bradshaw whatsoever. I mean, nope. You know, Ben's appeared in 216 regular season games. That's the third most in team history. He started the most teams at the position. He has the most wins at that position, like we just said. He's in 15 seasons, as was heading into, of course, last year. He's led the Steelers to 9 postseason appearances. 7 AFC North titles, 4 AFC championships, and 2 Super Bowl rings, as we had mentioned, in 3 game appearances. So, you know, he's the youngest quarterback to ever win a Super Bowl, second youngest quarterback to win his second Super Bowl. And you know, this could go on forever. I'm not sure just how much more I want to say about individual stuff, but with the team, obviously, passing touchdowns of at least 60 yards, passing yards, passer rating, completions, pass attempts, completion percentage, yards per attempt, 300-yard passing games, 3,000-yard passing seasons, and then he's had the most 450-yard passing games in NFL history. 450 yards or more with 6. Fourth most 400-yard passing games in NFL history with 12. And the 7th most passing touchdowns in NFL history with 363. 6th most passing yards in NFL history. This was all just, some of this has slid a little because he didn't play last year, obviously. But some of the things that haven't slid is that he won 74 of his first 100 home game starts. It ties him as the 4th most in NFL history with Tom Brady. And let me see. Well, Brady, he's tied. I'm sorry. Brady has 87. Brett Favre has 82. Elway has 77. He's tied with Peyton Manning, who has 74. Some good company to be in. Second quarterback in team history to reach 100 career wins. That's why we bookended him with Terry Bradshaw and said no slight to Terry, right? Yep. Just the 4th quarterback in NFL history, joining Tom Brady, Joe Montana, and the aforementioned Terry Bradshaw to win 100 games in first 150 starts of their career. Let's see. 7th player in NFL history to record 125 wins as a starter in the regular season, joining Tom Brady, Drew Brees, John Elway, Brett Favre, Peyton Manning, and Dan Marino. I don't know how many more of these I got to go through to hammer home the point and say that this guy is, you know, all the names that he's in with here. He's a de facto Hall of Famer. To say he's anything less would just be preposterous.
Yeah, here I'll throw this stat at you.
I was trying to find it. I think I know the one.
This stat is there are 23 guys who have I think 23. I might have counted wrong. 23 guys who have thrown for 500 yards or more in a game, single game. Mm-hmm. Only 3 have done it more than once, and 2 of those people did it twice. Only Ben Roethlisberger has done it 3 times, and won every one of those games. Every single one he won. Tom Brady did it twice, won one, lost one. Drew Brees did it twice, won one, lost one. So, again, you're talking about, when you talk about Ben, only guy who threw 6 touchdown passes 2 games in a row.
Yeah.
He has done things in his career that nobody else has done. You go back and look at any highlight film of Ben Roethlisberger and early in his career where he just wouldn't go down, the toughness the guy possesses, and I know people want to call him, soft. He's not soft. Yes, he can be dramatic at times and he might overplay things, but again, that's usually stuff that happens off the field, right? He makes the dramatic statement after he's just done something ridiculous on the field. You just can't question the toughness of this guy, and you can't question that he's been a special talent for the Pittsburgh Steelers for the duration of his career, and you cannot question that when he does finally hang them up, there is no telling when the next Ben Roethlisberger is going to come into play, or if there will be another Ben Roethlisberger.
Yeah.
So we need to enjoy it while it lasts, and hope that this season is one that is more of what Ben has been than what we saw last year.
Well, he is he was the 5th quarterback in NFL history to register at least 5 touchdown passes in 6 games in a career. Drew Brees with 10, Peyton Manning with 9, Brady with 6, Marino with 6. Only quarterback in NFL history to throw 3 touchdown passes of 94 yards or more. I mean, it's mind-boggling. He also had, let me see, for everyone who says the Steelers are terrible on the road, he was the 3rd active quarterback heading into last season to reach 50 road wins. Or he became the 3rd active NFL quarterback to reach 50 road wins when he did so during the 2016 season, also joining Brady and Brees in that conversation. And you'd have mentioned the 500-yard game stuff. That's the one I was looking for. But there's a couple more that go in with that before we close the book on this particular show. Let me see. I'm trying to find. Threw at least 1 touchdown pass in 45 consecutive home games, which stands the 3rd longest streak in NFL history. Brady had 47 and Brees had 60. That's a lot of games. And 1 of 2 quarterbacks in NFL history to start a season with a 13-game streak or more of games with at least 250 passing yards and a touchdown pass, joining Drew Brees, who did it with 16 games back in 2011. And finally, another one that Ben can hold, and only he could hold until somebody eventually breaks it, because that's what records are made to be, and then they're going to start adding more games, Brian. So records are made to fall, right? Big Ben has registered a perfect passer rating 4 times in his career, the most such games by an NFL quarterback in league history, with a minimum of 10 pass attempts. So just, what else can you say about the guy? It's all legendary stuff, but for some reason, it's just... He doesn't get the same kind of love outside of it. And you know what? If you get your hands on like any of these media guides or anything like this, there's so much more. There's literally, I'm looking at 2.5 pages of 3.5 pages of Ben Roethlisberger career highlights. And that, if that isn't a storybook chapter for your career, I don't know what else is. And I just saw something else with Jesse James, and he should have caught it. And that's where I close this thing. Here.
That should have. Jesse caught it.
Oh, Jesse. Yeah, I'm sorry. Jesse did catch it. So it should have counted. Yeah. That's what I meant to say.
There you go.
So, Brian, this was fun. Hopefully entertaining for everyone else out there that's listening. If you happen to think so, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe as usual. And thanks once again, buddy, for joining me today.
Always a pleasure, even when I have to talk about someone I don't want to talk about.
Don't worry, we're going to do that more often. I just like the way you bring up certain things just to kind of rattle me. But I will put the bow on our show with saying this. We started with seafood. You talked about bacon wrapped scallops. Is there any? And you said how good they were, and it was like I forgot to mention. Is there anything that isn't good with bacon?
Yes.
Uh-oh.
Chocolate covered bacon. That's some nasty stuff.
Okay,
right
that's one of those Frankenstein fair foods you see when you go to the county fair.
That crap is wrong.
Wrong. You can't. Yeah, you can't do some of that. But I'll tell you what. There was before we had all the COVID stuff. There was a grocery chain here that had a Bacon Fest weekend, and they had a bacon-inspired beer, a craft beer that had a smoky flavor. There were bacon chocolate chip cookies, and there were also a variety of maple bacon kettle cooked chips. Some of the most delicious stuff I have ever ingested in my life. So very good stuff, and I'm sure we could talk food as long as we talked football, but we're going to leave it at that. So once again, thanks for joining me, my friend. My friend's name is Brian, and my name is Joe, and until next time, we encourage everyone out there to be safe, be good, and we'll catch you later.
We would like to thank you for listening and remind our listeners to follow us on social media and our website, www.steelcityunderground.com.